You ever start a movie late at night after a long day with no intention of finishing it, but it pulls you in? Then you have to talk about it with your friends and family because it was so good or so bad? You, my friend, are not alone.
Welcome to the Midnight Watch Podcast.
What's up, guys? You're listening to the Midnight Watch Podcast, the podcast where we discuss the movies that we all love, secretly love, and love to hate. I'm your host, Jeremy, along with my brother Josh, and we hope you're ready for this amazing episode we have.
Here at the Midnight Watch, we like to break down movies that are at least 10 years old or older, and in case anyone was wondering, we definitely are big on spoilers. At the end of our review, we'll rate these movies in 4 categories. Number 1, did it hit its mark when it was released? Number 2, is it still relevant today? Number 3, for personal enjoyment. And number 4, is it a midnight watch? So, Jeremy, what ghoulish take of a movie are we reviewing today?
This movie lives up to its name, confusing and amusing its audience since its original release in 1979. No matter how you die, the tall man will get you. Lock your doors and stay away from the windows as we review Phantasm.
Boy! I don't even know what did you mean, boy? What was it?
The scene for the movie where he's at the end, he's
boy.
Like, there you go.
Okay.
No, we'll just leave this in. That was great. That was great.
I totally missed that. That was a soft toss too. I just freaking watched the movie today.
Oh, that was boy. That was such a great line from the movie. He only has like 15 lines in the movie, I swear.
Yeah, I don't even think he has that many.
Yeah, I think
he's such a great character though.
I know. For this, we're talking about The Tall Man. So this is Phantasm, directed by Don Coscarelli. And this came out in 1979 on a budget of $3,000. It was an independent movie that he had made and shot only on the weekends, actually. He had to, it's kind of cool. He actually rented all of his film equipment on a Friday, and then he kept it until Monday. So he only had to pay for 2 days instead of 4 days. But they shot this movie on the weekend for over a year to film this entire movie.
That's awesome. I think Tarantino did that. Not necessarily on Reservoir Dogs, but I think he was working on a movie before Reservoir Dogs while he was kind of learning. I remember him saying something about that too, where he would rent the equipment for a weekend at a time. Heck, he might have even been inspired by this situation here.
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool because the director, he'd done 2 movies before this, and he was the youngest director, I believe, to actually get a deal with a movie company. He was like 19 when he made the first movie, which is called like Jim. What's it called? I wrote it down and I can't remember where it is. Oh, Jim the World's Greatest came out in 1975. He was like 19. So he was 23 when he directed this movie, which is pretty darn young. You do see that sometimes with other movies, but that's pretty young. But I mean, since it's an independent film, that makes sense. But
sure.
This movie,
yeah, there's a strong indie vibe.
Yes,
this movie.
You lose that vibe as the sequels go on, especially the second movie, which I like the second movie a lot. But anyways, this movie made over $12 million once they finally distributed this film, and it's pretty cool. It came out at that peak moment of horror movies where you had Halloween came out the year before. And then you also had Dawn of the Dead came out in 1978. So those were like 2 big horror movies. And then this movie came out and then started getting acclaim. And it was they put it out. They only had 500 copies of this movie. So they had to actually play it in certain theaters and then move it to other theaters and move it around. They didn't have like a wide release of this film.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, so word of mouth carried it. And then later, Alien came out in the same year, so it was kind of nestled in right with all of these big, now horror classics. And so,
sure,
I thought that was pretty cool. But
yeah,
this movie is starring the infamous Angus Scrimm as the Tall Man, and then we've got Michael Baldwin, Reggie Bannister, Bill Thornbury, and Kathy Lester, and she is the Lady in Lavender in this movie, which is kind of funny. I didn't know this before I did a little bit of research, but there's like a cult following for her character, which is
interesting.
It is, because technically, spoilers, she's actually the Tall Man, you know?
Right.
So Which that's kind of funny though. In the entire series, this is the only character that he morphs into. So, I guess we can start right off the bat with. Oh, let's hit the synopsis first.
Yes. So, FYI.
Quick. Oh yeah, no, go ahead. No, go ahead.
This movie makes no sense. I mean, it does, but trying to explain it, it sounds like the most bonkers thing you've ever heard, and it sounds terrible. And in a matter of opinion, maybe it is terrible. But anyways, here's a quick rundown. So we have Mike, a young teenage boy who has just lost his parents, who is afraid to lose his brother also, follows said brother to a funeral where Mike witnesses the tall man lifting a coffin on his own. Mike decides to investigate and discovers that the tall man, protected by his flying spheres, is shrinking dead bodies down to half their normal size and reanimating them as slaves. It is then up to Mike, his brother, and Reggie the ice cream man to stop the tall man.
So
I was like the most stupid. Where'd you find this?
I found
this. Is it IMDb?
It's IMDb. This is not their official one. This was like one of their a person on there like put this on as the synopsis of the film, and I was like, this is the best one, hands down.
Totally.
Because
whoever wrote this, no, I'm not making fun of you. But I am out of respect.
No, we're not making fun of you. We're making fun of the movie. Like that is the movie. That is literally
totally
the movie.
And it really is.
Yeah, and so like just seeing this movie on paper, I don't think that he would have gotten the funding for this movie anyways. Because then like, I mean, this movie is bonkers. So like the cool thing about this movie though, and the reason I picked this movie to review is just because like this movie's actually creepy. Like you read that synopsis, you're like, this movie's gonna be stupid. And then you watch the movie, and this movie is actually legitimately creepy. It's got a really interesting, specific, creepy vibe to it that I haven't felt from other movies. It's got a very unique, creepy feel. It feels like a nightmare. That's which we will circle back around to that. But that is very well put, I would say. Yeah. It does have a nightmare kind of vibe to it. And it makes sense because like the name itself, Phantasm, means like an acts of illusion or something like that, something that's potentially not real. And the whole movie, the way they edited this together is nonsensical in the case of that it doesn't, there's so many parts that there's like fake outs and it doesn't make sense. And then at the end of this movie, since we're spoiling this movie like crazy, one guy says like, it was just a bad dream that you had. Like none of this happened. Your brother actually died in a car accident, and the whole time that you're trying to keep your brother from like getting hurt or dying or something like that, that's just you emotionally reacting to that. And then of course they have the jump scare at the very end of the movie where the tall man gets him, pulls him into the mirror. Right. And
which speaking of jump scares, real quick,
yeah,
I didn't find any of these jump scares to be that good. Like they weren't bad, but I didn't feel like they were very jumpy, if that makes sense.
I agree. I feel like it was more unnerving.
Oh, like for sure. And the way you said it's creepy and whatnot, I think that's definitely more of a vibe than just, oh, we're going along and then bam, it gets you.
Right. And that's kind of also is kind of like, I think why the first Halloween movie works so well, and that I don't remember. We'll review that movie another time, but that movie though, there's not really any gore in the first movie, and then so this movie is actually kind of funny. There is definitely gore in this movie, but there's not a high body count. There's got a couple stabbing scenes, and then of course you have the infamous silver spheres or the balls or whatever that fly around and drill into the people's heads. And that one scene though, where the janitor gets it, is like that was a cool scene. Like I was impressed by that, you know. And they actually they rated this movie X back in the day because it was bloody.
Oh, that scene?
Yeah, it was bloody, and then he fell down, and then if you notice, like he pees himself after he's dead, which makes sense.
It's super realistic. I put that in my notes because I was very impressed that is even in modern movies, you rarely see when somebody dies, generally their bowels and their bladder releases, and that's like it's really extra disturbing. Like when someone hangs themselves, they generally piss themselves for sure, and
Yeah.
It's very messy and gross. And so when you see him laying on the ground, just the bottom half, and you see that bubbly yellow fluid.
Yeah, and then Mike, our hero, like pulls back from it because he's right next to him because he just missed getting hit with the ball himself.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's funny. I feel like he was more grossed out by the pee than he was the voluminous amounts of blood spurting everywhere.
I actually agree. And but there's parts in this movie, though, that are really cool because then, like, his older brother, when he finally convinces his older brother that this is happening and the tall man's actually stealing dead bodies and stuff, they start picking up all the guns, and his brother gives him this pep talk of, like, don't point a gun at somebody unless you're going to shoot them. And you don't shoot somebody unless you're going to kill them. There's no warning shots. Warning shots are BS. And just like that whole sequence, which I thought was kind of cool, actually, because like I feel like they do a good job of these brothers trying to protect each other in the movie.
Right.
And I love Reggie Bannister's character, Reggie, the ice cream man.
Dude, I know. Okay, how about that bald guy ponytail he's rocking?
I saw this on the internet. They call it the skullet. He never loses it the entire series.
No, it's so bad.
Yeah.
Like Trinity like half dared me to do that someday. Like if I could hide my hair like under a beanie like for a couple months during the wintertime.
Oh my gosh.
Pull that on the girls, like let it grow out.
I would love to be dressed up as Reggie the ice cream man for a Halloween one day and do the skullet, because it's so bad, and he keeps it the entire series. There's 5 movies out, and I'm not gonna lie, I went down the rabbit hole on this one. I had seen the first movie years ago and it creeped me out, and then I didn't watch the rest of them. And so after I told you, what was that, a couple days ago, we should watch this one, I rewatched this one, and I just started watching all the other ones. I watched almost all the sequels. I actually didn't finish the last one because it was really bad. But I really like the second and third movie. But it's just it's kind of funny. They have several parts in it that become staples of this series, and that's, you've got the tall man, you've got Reggie with his skullet look, then you've got the Barracuda car, which was a freaking sweet ride.
That thing is amazing.
That movie, that car is in every movie. And then they introduce Reggie's special weapons in the next movie, which is a 4-barrel shotgun that he sometimes uses wisely. So yeah, this first movie though has a little bit of a different feel to it though than the rest of the movies, and I feel kind of conflicted in how I feel about this movie. I feel like it's genius in one retrospect that the movie intentionally is confusing, and there's like dream sequences built on top of dream sequences, so you're just not sure what's really happening and what's not.
Right.
But at the same time, I feel like that's bad editing. And
yeah, this movie's super choppy for sure.
Oh yeah. But the thing is though, I feel like that's the director's style. If you watch his other movies, he has movies where he constantly is just flipping. Like a good example of that is John Dies at the End. Did you see that one?
I have seen most of that movie, yes.
So that movie, I don't think makes sense unless you've read the book, because it just jumps around so much. And I chopped that up to his editing style. And so in the Phantasm series, I feel like it works because it's not supposed to make sense. Like they're constantly messing with dimensions and like messing with the person's mind. Like, is this real? Is this not real? And that's what gives the real horrific nightmare quality to it, where it's not a very linear story at all. I think the most linear one is the second movie, which had a lot of producers involved in it, and so that's the biggest budget one, and so that's why the director didn't have as much free reign on that movie.
Gotcha.
But anyways, yeah, so where were you when you first saw this movie, Josh?
I was at work today, and I had just finished working my first flight for the day, and I was on my first break, and I popped this one on the old iPad.
Nice.
So I've been familiar with this movie for a long time, and I had just never gotten around to watching it. So it was fun.
Nice. Yeah, the first time I saw it was years ago. I think I already said that. But yeah, so what was your thoughts about this movie? Is there anything specifically that immediately you were like, I need to talk about this?
Well, I thought it was kind of funny right off the bat, and I don't know if this is a character that is just very confident or just terrible acting, but the older brother, Jody, when he's walking around in the mausoleum at the beginning, waiting for the funeral to start, and he's hearing all these weird, creepy noises, and that dude is just so chill. In fact, the entire movie, he is just, I won't say he doesn't have any emotion, it's just, he's just kind of like, oh, okay. He just shrugs it off. Like, whatever crazy thing's happening, he's just like rolling with it. Like, it's no big deal.
Oh, dude, I totally agree with you.
So there was that, and then the other thing, good Lord, at the beginning, there's a cymbal part, and they are just wailing on this ride cymbal, and it's just super washy and clangy sounding. And it comes in a few times, which that being said, I really enjoy the soundtrack because it's kind of minimalist. There's like a full drum kit for most of the percussion for the movie, and then it's just synthesizers and electric keyboards and a lot of organ, which the organ works really well, especially with the funeral. Cemetery kind of vibe going on. But the other thing that really stood out to me, and I had to fact check this while I was watching because it sounded so much like him, but I really thought that melodically, the soundtrack, some of the major themes that come up in the movie, they totally sound like John Carpenter. And
oh, really?
I for a second, I'm like, he had to have helped write the soundtrack for this, but if he did, he's uncredited, but not all of it, because he's very synth heavy, and this stuff had a lot of this soundtrack had a lot of other instrumentation, like with electric keyboards and like a Rhodes piano kind of sound, or all the organs, which that I can recall, not usually the direction that Carpenter goes, but but melodically, like I said, it totally had that Carpenter vibe, and I really enjoyed that, and it lent itself really well to the kind of, not just the creepy vibe, but there's purpose behind it, and it was moving, and it was almost had a quasi adventurous kind of feel, like especially with Mike, the 13-year-old, because it's kind of a, I don't want to say this is a coming of age movie, but it's definitely, being a young teenager trying to deal with some heavy life situations.
Yeah, and it's pretty awesome. Like I agree. The music was made by Fred Myrow and Malcolm Seagrave, which I'm not familiar with either one of theirs work. I mean, that I know of, but I agree. I love the soundtrack in this movie. I think that it works good because it's simplistic. It's very, they play the same themes a lot over and over. But I like that, though, because a lot of the movie is Mike goes out, sees something crazy, comes back, tries to ends up convincing his brother something bad happened. His brother leaves to deal with it, tells Mike not to follow, right. And then Mike follows. And then the same thing happens like 4 times before the end of the movie. And
when Jody finally decides to let him, all right, let's work together on this.
Right.
And surprise, it works out better.
Well, actually, even then, he's like, wait here for a little bit. Oh, right. And then the tall man comes and gets him, and then he like gets away from him, and then they defeat the tall man, but they don't really defeat the tall man.
But I also feel a little bit suspicious that Jody kind of used Mike as bait at the very end of the movie. It's almost it's like he planned to do that giant rock slide onto that open mine shaft that his little brother just led the quarry to, and then he jumps across the mouth of the mine shaft. I mean, and then that
epic,
that washing machine sized boulder like just misses him.
It fits perfectly in the hole too,
pretty good planning on Jody's part, I must say.
Oh, it was fantastic. The one thing I thought there's several things I want to talk about in this movie. I like how dumb this movie is at different parts, and then I like how smart this movie is in different parts too. Like the part 2 when he gets locked in his Mike, the younger brother, gets locked in his bedroom by Jody because Jody doesn't want him to get hurt anymore, and he has that because of the couple sequences earlier. He's got a shotgun shell on him, and so how he just like puts the tack on the actual firing pin of the shotgun and then tapes it to the hammer and uses that to blow the door open.
Right.
I was like, that is so cool.
Right.
Like
the fact that entire sequence, somebody thought that up
and it fits pretty well. It's a little outlandish, but it fits the general vibe of the movie.
Right. I have no idea if that would actually work, but I was just like, that is so cool though, that he was just, it shows that like Mike, the main character, is very smart, and he's not dumb.
Well, that being said, that is the most handy mechanic, best driver I've ever seen, and he's darn good in a gunfight. And he's freaking 13. Like, what kind of stuff has this kid been through before all this?
Right? For real. Oh, but I do love that part, though. So, he goes to the mausoleum. He breaks in the little window, and he goes in underneath to see what's going on. And because he doesn't have proof yet that something weird's going on.
Right.
And so then the tall man follows him, and he slams the door on the tall man's hand. I love that sequence because, like, you're like, oh, he's safe. And then the camera just pulls back.
Right.
There's no music. And then you just see the hand start moving.
Right. That's pinched in the door.
It's pinched to the door. And I just was like, that to me was freaking creepy.
Right.
Like, that they didn't play that up as a jump scare or anything. No. And then, yeah.
And I think,
so that's why.
And I think that's why, even though I feel like the parts that are maybe supposed to be a jump scare aren't real scary, they fit really well. And it just kind of lends itself to that slow creepiness kind of thing. Like you said, just that pulling back of the shot so you can see the hand right there.
Right.
Is tasteful. I don't know. It was cool. It was well done. And especially in a low budget kind of way and not, because I think classically a lot of horror movies are just built on the jump scare. It's like, here it comes. There's the next one. Okay, here comes the next one. And it's just over and over and over. And this was cool. And especially at a time period where all of that stuff and slasher movies and all that really started becoming a thing, that late 70s and early 80s.
Right. Yeah, I was going to say, like, this is a transition movie. It's right in that spot of, like, you've got the 70s grindhouse flicks, and then you've got all of the Italian slasher movies that were getting really famous at that time. Then you've got George Romero's films coming up. And then right at the beginning of John Carpenter, and then it turns into the 80s slasher films and then monster movies and all that. So it's like this movie actually does feel like an Italian movie to me in certain parts of it. It doesn't feel like an 80s movie. Technically it's 1979, so it's more of a 70s movie. But yeah, it's pretty cool though. And then I like that too. I laughed out loud though when he cuts the guy's fingers off, grabs the finger, brings it home, and shows his brother as proof.
Right.
And you open the box, and I didn't expect the finger to actually be in there. I thought it was gonna like disappear or something like that.
Or be a mouse or something else, or.
Right, and because I would keep Mike being by himself, having to deal with this mystery man.
But yeah, the way the brother's just like, okay, all right,
he just I
believe you. he's just kind of not matter of fact, but he's just like, okay, good enough for me,
Yeah,
like
he goes along with.
Yeah, it's like, it's not like he didn't want to. It wasn't like he was trying to not believe him. He was just like, prove it. Okay, you did. That's all right.
He never doubts Mike in this movie. He's just like, I'm gonna need some information. Okay, that works for me.
Right.
And then
let's strap up. Let's go.
And then immediately after that, yeah. And then I love how they just pull in Reggie then, who is not a main character in this movie, and he becomes the main character in the rest of the series. I'd say he's more of a main character than Mike is actually.
Wow.
But
dude, that guy's got to be one of the creepiest ice cream men in the history of ice cream men. I swear.
The way he looks, for sure.
He looks like a pedophile.
And it's funny because I actually really like that actor. I think he's actually comes across as a really genuine, sweet person.
Yeah.
But no, I agree. I don't know though if that's also just the style of the ice cream truck, and the fact that it's an ice cream truck in a horror movie sounds like something bad's gonna happen.
Right. And it really doesn't, as far as like how you could make ice cream trucks worse. But I just mean as a character, he'd be one pervy looking ice cream man.
Which is funny. There's one part where I was gonna write it down, but there's like one line where he's like, "Yeah, then the ice cream you'll be slinging them like nobody's business" or something like that. When he's talking about he wants Mike to help him with crowd control, right when they try to kill the fly that the finger turned into or whatever, and he's talking about that business, and then of course he gets roped into that right then.
Right.
But In the second movie, it's literally like two sentences. You find out that Reggie actually had an entire family. Like he had a wife and he had a daughter.
What?
And then like, yeah. And then, yeah, like they all die at the beginning of the second movie. And you don't even see him. He just talks about him for like two sentences. And then they drive around the corner and the house blows up. And you're like, well, there goes Reggie's family.
That's
and then they don't talk about it the rest of the series.
Got that out of the way.
Right.
Backstory,
And
done.
And then he's a womanizer the rest of the series, which is like really funny because he gets freaking knifed in this movie.
Right.
And you're like, oh, for no reason too. You're just like, Reggie, no, don't go over and help that person.
Right.
And
well, and then Jody's like, no, leave him, he's dead. And then you're like, what the heck? You just like
right. He's like, get out of here.
Didn't even go up to him, but you're assuming he's dead and you bounce. But I guess that kind of plays into the dream sequence. Like, was it a dream? Okay, before we get too far, there's a scene where Reggie pulls up to the house and he's got his acoustic guitar like stashed in the side compartment. And he pulls it out and he goes up and Jody's, playing that Strat. Is he playing a Strat? I can't remember. But he's playing electric guitar and, drinking a beer and playing this like kind of bluesy folk rock kind of song. And then, and he's really playing. He's really playing, really singing. And then Reggie, busts out the acoustic and then he starts totally, pulling off these blues riff kind of leads. And I'm like, these guys are really playing. And I think
both of the actors were actual accomplished musicians. Reggie was in a band like during at that time.
Well,
I think. Oh, go ahead.
I was saying I totally believe it. And I feel like it also lends itself to an indie movie or extremely low budget movie where as a director or whoever's putting the movie together, I mean, you really want to find people that are a, multiple tool player, somebody who can do, you don't want to just get the good looking guy, but you want that good looking guy that can sing and dance and juggle, because there's that one scene where he's got to juggle and it's like, I can't bring in an extra to just do that, or a stunt man, or I don't have money to write a song and have these guys play it in the background while these guys fake it. I mean,
right.
So I don't know if that was kind of intentional, but it was a very cool touch to the film and it added some realism to it. Anytime you see an artist or an actor rather, actually singing or playing an instrument in the movie, I'm always impressed by it. And maybe that's just kind of because I'm a musician, but I
agree. I agree because most of the time too, like also like at the end when Reggie's talking to Mike, he's like, "Get your stuff. We'll leave before daybreak," and then he pulls the guitar out and starts playing this little riff.
That was hilarious because you just had this really heartfelt, it's okay, buddy, you're gonna be okay, let's get out of here for a little while, change the scenery, hang in there. And then he starts playing this like peppy happy song, and he's just like, what the heck, dude? You just were comforting this kid who had a nightmare because his whole family's dead now, and then you're playing this like happy love song.
Hey, nothing keeps the ice cream man down.
Nothing.
Yeah, no, he's the thing that I thought was cool was Bill Thornberry, though, the guy who plays Jody. That was a song that he actually had written and he was working on while they were doing the movie, and so they ended up. I liked to because that tied into the way that to close the interdimensional forks, the doorways at the end.
That was
because remember
awesome.
when he's got the little the tuning fork, and then he figures it out and he hits the two poles at the end, and that closes the door. Otherwise, they would.
Right. And I hope you realize that was a portal to the planet Tatooine where the Jawas are, because those are straight up Jawas in the movie. And that's how we bring Star Wars into this movie. I actually didn't think about that. Yeah, I was actually, when I was going to write the synopsis, I was going to talk about the zombie Jawas. Yeah. And then, because somebody was like, they're evil Ewoks. And I was like, no, they're not Ewoks. They're freaking Jawas, like straight up. Straight up Jawas.
Yeah,
freakishly strong Jawas.
But it's actually funny though that they finished filming this movie beforehand, or in 1977 before Star Wars came out. So they're actually they didn't steal it at all. It was totally just happened to apparently. It's not an original idea. Let's face it.
Sure.
On either side,
right?
But the thing is, though, in the second movie, though, they do actually show what their faces look like, and they look like these little, like, scrunched up Cabbage Patch Kids or whatever that are, like, demonic looking, so they don't look like Jawas, technically.
Sure.
But
well, no one technically knows what Jawas look like, just the red eyes.
Just the eyes. But the one thing I thought was cool though is J.J. Abrams is actually a big fan of Phantasm.
Oh yeah,
and so,
I have a question about that. Continue.
Yeah. So, anyways, he helped with the restoration, funding the restoration for this movie because it was just in such bad. They didn't have a good copy of this film,
right.
And it was really beat up. This movie's dark, and when I mean dark, I mean like it's hard to see certain parts of it because it takes place at night outside, and the lighting is sometimes pretty bad. So they were able to clean that up, fix the audio in some parts, and restore this movie so you can actually buy it on a high def version of it. And it's cool. He liked this movie so much that he named Captain Phasma of the new Star Wars movies after the Phantasm movies.
So that's a very cool little trivia tidbit. Something I realized as soon as this movie starts, it says, as far as production companies, it says Bad Robot in a very retro thing. And I'm like, hey, that's what's his face's production company. So I was like, either this is a really old production company and he either took their name. I was just confused by that, and I wanted to ask you. So is that there because the version we watched is a remastered version?
Yeah, that's why. Yeah, because his production company helped, the director helped Don actually find the footage and again get it cleaned up and get it as best as it could be because it's a pretty beat up movie.
Okay, so that's super cool because I noticed that immediately that's J.J. Abrams.
Production company, but it also had redone the logo and everything, so it looked like a late 70s, early 80s graphic, which was super cool. That'd be a sweet T-shirt.
That would be.
So one thing that it's a weird. I don't know if it's weird. It's just something that I really like. But there's a scene where the tall man Angus Scrim he's walking like downtown, wherever their little town is. He's walking on the sidewalk up to where Reggie has his ice cream truck parked, and there's like steam or condensate, whatever, steam coming from the ice cream truck. And the tall man's walking down the sidewalk, and it's a slow motion. And then Angus Scrim is such a long, lanky guy, and it's just this like a greyhound walking in slow motion down the sidewalk. And
yes,
I just think I don't know. It's so in the Wes Anderson movie, the train movie that I just forgot, the Darjeeling Limited. There's a scene where Adrian Brody is running in slow motion along the train platform, and Adrian Brody is another long, lanky actor like Angus Scrimshaw, who in slow motion, I don't know what it is. I love watching all those limbs moving, just like water. It's just super fluid. And so this scene of the tall man walking up the sidewalk reminded me of that Wes Anderson scene where Adrian Brody's running along the train platform in slow motion, kind of that same angle of shot. And I think he's supposed to look menacing as he's coming up the sidewalk, but that is just anytime I see a tall, lanky guy getting filmed in slow motion, I'm just like, that's awesome.
It's a cool shot. I was actually about to bring that up too. I think you said his name was Angus Scrimshaw.
That's it. Yeah, I know I butchered it. Angus Scrim. Sorry, Mr. Scrim.
Angus Scrim.
He's probably dead, but
yeah, he passed away in 2016. R.I.P. Rest in peace. Yeah, he apparently was a big fan favorite. Very charming guy, very likable person, and everybody loved him. And so apparently he's like super sweet actually.
I'm
so
sure
this character very different from how he is in real life. And the first scene that they shot, like Mike was having a hard time not laughing at him when he was doing the serious face because he was just such a likable person, and then when he's doing serious, he went like all in.
Oh yeah,
for this role, and which has made him. This is definitely his most famous role.
Sure,
but that sequence when he's walking in slow motion past the ice cream truck, and you can see the cold air coming out of the thing, and he like pulls back from it, and he stops there for a second, and then he moves on. They cut out the end sequence. This movie originally was 3 hours long, and then they shot it. They showed it to test audiences, and it did terrible. So they cut it down dramatically, and they lost most of that footage. But then, like I think it was like 95 or 96, something like that. They found some of the footage and actually incorporated it into the fourth movie. So it's kind of cool. You see all this like deleted scenes from the first movie, but it's like 20 years later. So you get to see the same actors, and then there's a flashback, and it's actually the same actors when they were younger. And it's really cool.
That's a good use of old footage.
Yeah, that's cool. I didn't really like that movie, but I thought that was really cool that they actually tried to build a movie around the flashbacks. But anyways, the point of that scene, though, is to show that the tall man doesn't like the cold because his home planet is hot. And so the end of the movie is they actually shoot his face with a fire extinguisher and his head explodes. But they cut that out. I don't remember. How do they kill the tall man in this movie? Did they actually kill him?
No.
Oh, yeah. With the
mine shaft. He falls in.
The mine shaft. They give him the shaft.
They give him.
Yeah.
Well done.
I forgot about that. He dies in like every movie, but because this movie. So the director intentionally has decided not to explain certain things and just let the fans try to figure out how does this world work.
Right.
And so they give you a little bit more backstory with each movie, but there's not a lot. Like they intentionally keep it vague so the fans can, because they never really explain like what's the tall man, like what are his powers? Is he a clone? Because there's more than one of them because he keeps coming back. Anyways, it's kind of like with so one thing I wanted to, man, I'm just rambling on right now. I'm going to back it up real quick. One thing I wanted to say, though, is the sequels reminded me of the sequels to The Nightmare on Elm Street, where they slowly build on the lore for Freddy Krueger. And I did like the second and third one. I thought they were cheesy, like the sequels to the original Nightmare on Elm Street, where the first movie's a classic, and then the rest of them kind of get significantly worse as they go along.
Right.
But yeah, this one was kind of the same way, but the tall man was definitely pretty scary, actually, just for being a tall, brooding guy.
Right.
He's actually pretty scary.
It's a good use of, they didn't have to do a bunch of makeup or creating some kind of elaborate costume or something. They just had kind of like not Christopher Lloyd, Christopher
Lee.
Christopher Lee. It's very much like him in just that he's such an imposing, terrifying figure of a man, and it worked really well.
Yes, I totally agree. Let's see. One thing, I think that's about it, actually, what I wanted to talk about this movie. Do you have anything else you want to talk about?
You mentioned that Cuda, the Plymouth Barracuda. That is such a cool car, and like a lot of cars in the 60s too, but 70s and 80s, these cars just played a big part in the movie without, it's not like the car was a star or nothing, but there's so many sweet parts where they're just burning out in this car and just hauling around and just stomping at it and, spinning the tires. And it's such a huge, powerful car. And you don't necessarily see that in a lot of newer movies unless it's about that car or something. It's an exotic or something, or a muscle car, to be specific. But this wasn't like an uncommon car. I mean, it was, at the time. So.
Yeah. No, I agree. And it does become a significant part of the story. Well, not significantly. That's the car that they drive through the whole series.
Sure.
So, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. And like I said, Mike is a heck of a driver, especially driving a car with that much horsepower. So, good job.
Well, it's funny that the actual actor learned how to drive a car with that car. He was like 14 when he learned how to drive.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
So, apparently he had like a heck of a time, a lot of fun making this movie. I mean, think about it. It must have been so much fun to film to film this movie.
Yeah.
Shooting guns, driving cars, all kinds of stuff.
I do have one other thing that I want to talk about real quick before we wrap it up. So there's the scene where the finger has turned into some kind of killer bug, and they wrap it up in the jacket, and they're like flinging themselves around holding this jacket with supposedly this powerful whatever alien bug in it. And it's great practical effects. It's super fun how corny it is, and it totally reminds me of maybe the most famous scene that's similar to that, but Evil Dead 2, where Bruce Campbell is fighting his own hand, which is attached to his body, and flinging himself around. So it's not as good as the Bruce Campbell one, which I think you can only attribute that to the genius of Bruce Campbell and his acting abilities doing that. But it was super fun, and it just reminded me of that because that came out, a year or two after this.
Yeah, 1981. Yeah, 2 years after this movie.
So another, great low budget film. So, anyways, that was fun. It reminded me of that. So,
and it's kind of.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's kind of funny too. Roger Avery actually wrote a script in the mid '90s, wanting Bruce Campbell to come in and be a main character for a Phantasm movie that was going to be called Phantasm 1999. and it's going to be set in the future where the tall man had already kind of taken over the world.
Oh wow.
And I don't know if it was supposed to be a tie-in. Excuse me, like a tie-in to the Evil Dead series or what, but they had talked about it. The Don, I can never remember his name, Don Coscarelli. Sorry, but he did the movie Bubba Hotep with Bruce Campbell, and so like they had this is before they did that movie together, but he wanted to do it, but then of course they never made it. So
Right.
that would have been pretty fun though.
That would have been a cool tie-in, but yeah, Bubba Hotep, also great.
Yes,
Love that movie.
I want to watch the movie again. We should review that movie too.
I agree. I think that'll be fun. Okay, any final thoughts you have?
No, that's I think that's about it.
Yeah, I think this movie had kind of a cool moral to it, about overcoming fear and also dealing with, losing the people you love, and what that's like, and especially looking at it from, a child or a young person's perspective and how big and scary that can be. So I thought it had an interesting, a cool kind of moral to it.
Yes, I did.
So
I agree.
Well, Jeremy, do you think the movie hit the mark back in '79?
I do. I think it's one of those awesome independent films that actually made it big, and it's a cult classic in horror movies. If you like horror movies, like you said, you'd heard of this movie for a long time, even if you hadn't seen it. You recognized the name and the silver spheres and the tall man and all that stuff. So yeah, it's a classic staple, I would say, in horror movies, especially for the more of the cosmic horror type of movies, more of a Lovecraftian type of movie. It's not that. It doesn't fit in any genre.
Right.
But
it has it has kind of a sci-fi vibe to it for sure. When you take into account the interplanetary deviousness of the tall man.
Right. It's got fantasy elements to it, all that stuff. Yeah. What about you? Think it hit it?
I think so.
I gave it an A.
I gave it a B, but I can't even really say why, because it did pretty well, and it was like you said, it's a cult classic. I think it obviously spawned a whole bunch of sequels, and in the horror genre, it's a respected classic for sure. So would you say it's relevant now? It's a little bit of a tricky question to.
That is a good question, actually. Well, I did not expect that question. No, I see. That's a tough one. It's a cult classic. I want to say it influenced a lot of directors and a lot of people in horror movies. So it is relevant in the sense of in movie making history. It is relevant.
Right.
And then of course dealing with something as scary as death is. So I'm gonna give it This is a tough one. I'm gonna give it a B for being. I'll give it a C for being relevant. What about you?
I agree. I give it a C. I think it's held up not as like a top cult classic, but it's right there. I think considering the kind of movie it was, I think a C is a fair rating. This many years later, and like you said, for the historical benchmark that it was, and the inspiration that it's been to generations after the fact. So yeah, I think a C is good. And how about personal enjoyment? What would you give this one?
Personal enjoyment. I probably give it a C as well. I liked it. I actually like the second movie better, to tell you the truth. Just for personal enjoyment.
Sure.
And I think partly it's because it's actually more linear. It has more of a linear story. It's not as mind trippy. So I give it a C though. It's a solid flick. What about you?
Same. It's just a fun kind of indie movie. Indie movies are, most of the time my favorite. I love a good indie flick. I love seeing people, take little or no budget and be creative with it. And it's definitely was that. So yeah, I give it a C. It's not one that I watch all the time, but
you mean it's not a midnight watch?
Well, leading into that, I have to say no. Not a midnight watch for me. How about you?
No, I don't think so. Yeah, there's certain parts of this movie that I would enjoy watching over again, but for the most part, most of this movie is it's a solid film, Josh.
No, it's solid. I can see myself having not watched it in a while, and maybe it was on and be like, oh yeah, Phantasm, and watch it for a little bit. But
Yeah.
Yeah. But hey,
Yeah, well,
anybody out there, if it is a midnight watch for you, we'd love to hear from you.
Oh yeah, that'd be great. No, this movie definitely has lots and lots of fans with a PH. Get it? Fans. That's not my joke. That's the internet's joke. So anyways, I think that about does it for this episode, though. So yeah, if you want to check out this movie, I actually watched it on Tubi. Did you watch it on Tubi?
I did.
Okay, I think it's also on Amazon Prime. For some reason, the second movie you have to pay for, but I think the rest of the movies are free out there somewhere.
That's cool.
Or it's on Prime.
Yeah.
But
I had not watched anything on Tubi before, and the commercials weren't too bad. It didn't really break up the flow of the movie.
yeah, it's not like Crackle, I think, where there's like
terrible. It's like every 10 minutes.
every 10 minutes. Yeah.
It's god awful.
Anyways,
It's horrible. Yeah, Tubi's really not that bad. I think there's like maybe 7 or 8 commercials in a movie. At least they're unedited movies, so it's like you're watching it on TV or something like that.
Right.
But yes, so special thanks to our sound producer, Jake Colvin. And if you guys enjoyed this episode, we'd love it if you shared it with your friends, family, or anybody that you think would like it.
yes, and please hit that old subscribe button for us. Give us a 5-star rating if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts. We love those positive reviews. And if you would like to contact us, please hit us up at themidnightwatchpodcast@gmail.com.
That's right. Thank you guys so much for listening. You have an amazing week. And as always, keep up the watch.